And everybody is muted at the minute, but if you feel a burning urge to ask a question as we're going along, you can unmute yourselves and feel free to do that. David, you look like you're somewhere really cool and forested.
Can you hear me now,
Yeah, I can hear you.
Helen? Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble seeing the screen. I'm doing an experiment. I'm in quite remote place, and I've had pretty good luck lately using this mobile hotspot, and so I thought I'd give it a try out here. But it's hard to see the screen because of all the glare. I think I've got it now. I
Well, we
should
can
probably
see you
mute
really
though.
well.
Okay, I
Yeah.
should mute it though because otherwise you'll have bird calls all through this.
That would be quite
Mostly,
fitting.
well, it's mostly white rump shama. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Let me just have a little look down as to how many people we've got. Okay, I think we can kick off. So just in case you joined us after we started recording, we are recording. We're going to put this up on our website so that anybody that missed it gets to see. And everybody is currently muted, but you can unmute and interrupt. You can also put questions in the chat. Feel free to do either of those things, and we'll have time at the end as well to address questions. So just in case anybody doesn't know me, I'm Helen Raine, the Hawaii Conservation Coordinator for Pacific Birds. And today is all about our strategic plan for Hawaii wetlands that we've been working on for about the past year. So the idea of today is to give everybody an overview of the plan, to kind of give you the bones of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then next week, we've got some workshops that you can participate in. And again, part of this process to help you make that decision, like, do you want to participate? Is this something that you feel we'd benefit from your input? So we'll go through the bones of the plan, and then next week is the workshops. Everyone's probably familiar with Pacific Birds by this point, but again, just in case, we are a joint venture and there are dozens of joint ventures across the USA. We all work in the same way to build partnerships and then trying to connect those partners with what they need to get the work done that they want to get done on the ground. And we also bring kind of strategic direction to those conservation priorities. We have a massive geography, as you can see on the screen, but there's just 5 of us, and I'm the only person in Hawaii. So the strategic plan, the last one was written in 2006. So it was past time for an update. And basically the goal is to help all of you do all the things that you're already doing and to connect you with the resources that you need. We're Pacific Birds, so obviously there's a heavy bird focus, but it's also about community and ecosystem and climate resilience. And so the objectives of the plan are really to kind of connect people with the money that they need and then support all of you and build capacity to get the work done. And we're also incorporating Indigenous priorities. And just hold on one second, I'm just going to shut my door. Okay, I'm back. The way we're going to do that is these enabling strategies. So that's just a sort of fancy way of saying how we're going to get all this work done. And we're actually going to take some time in the workshops next week to think about these strategies. Do we have the right ones? Can we rank them as to which are most important? And these are kind of the headlines, but what does that mean underneath? So we want to get some input from all of you on these strategies. And I just put for the first one what the subheadings are to kind of give you an idea of the thought that is behind all that. I'm not going to go into any detail right now, but that's what we'll get into partially next week. And then to give you an idea of what's been happening and then what is going to happen to get the plan over the finish line, the plan process actually started with the PICASC work in Molokai. So that was a wetland prioritization process that we went through on Molokai with the Molokai Wetland Partnership and others. And that helped to develop and test the methods that we've now kind of rolled out statewide. And they're broadly the same. We have had to make some tweaks as we went from a small island with few sites to the whole state with lots of sites. But it was great to be able to try that out in Molokai and really see that work and feel like we had a good basis. And we also talked the methods through with the Hawaii Wetland Committee. So that's the body that manages my work on Hawaii. And it's made up of agencies and nonprofits and other partners. We created a list of wetland sites and circulated it for people to comment if ones should be added, taken out. And then the bulk of the work has been individual emails and calls to land managers and owners to collect the data that we needed to do this. So thanks so much to all of you landowners and managers for cooperating with us on that, because without that, it would be really difficult to get this work done. So all of that went into a big matrix. And throughout that process, we've been coordinating with DLNR because they're also doing a similar process, which I'll talk about more later, but they're using the same base criteria to do that, to kind of keep the plans aligned. And then every site has had a site narrative written, and that is going back and forwards with land managers and owners to kind of review that process. So up to October, we're going to be finishing those site narratives. So if you do receive the narrative back, please do look at it, respond. That's your chance to kind of influence what goes out about your site in this plan. And we've pretty much finished the prioritization process, but what we want to do is have these workshops so we can think about the scoring system, because that is going to change the results. And barring accidents, it goes to graphic design, and then the plan gets launched in January. And then in April 16th to the 18th, the Hawaii Predator and Wetland Workshop has been rescheduled, which is awesome. We're excited about it, and that will be an opportunity to kind of demo the plan and think about action planning to kind of move forward the actions. So I think with all of you guys, I definitely do not need to get into the birds, but I just wanted to put this up here to kind of remind us of what the driver is behind this plan. You know, we still have pretty low formal estimates for these birds. We know what we need to do, broadly speaking. And there's an amazing opportunity to really affect waterbird recovery and try and move the needle on getting these waterbirds off the TNE list. So this is where we're at, and hopefully where we're going is waterbird recovery. So in terms of the habitats that we're covering, again, going back to the work in Molokai, Judy Drexler, the USGS principal investigator for that project, she built on the work of Erickson and Puttock and added some additional wetland habitat types. And so we're using Judy's criteria, and we're also looking at, you can see in the list below, but there's some additions of lakes, reservoirs, indigenous agriculture, and then other flooded aquaculture. So broadly speaking, these are the habitats we're working on in this plan. And this is a slide created by Erin Opie at the Hea National Estuarine Research Reserve, working with Kavika Winter and the team at Kako'oiwi. But just to kind of remind everybody that these different stages of lo'i provide different life cycle opportunities for birds. And there are still things that we need to work out with lo'i management and birds, but we definitely want to have it part of the solution, because it's one of those great opportunities where the community can get excited about lo'i restoration. It can offer bird habitat, and for sustainable long-term wetland management, I feel like this is a big part of the future. So that is very much in there. And Judy put together this nice slide, which again is just to keep at the forefront of our mind all the challenges we already know wetlands are facing, and again, this is what we're working to deal with. So just to give you a bit of background on the plan development, how we went about creating the matrix that is going to drive the prioritization process. So for all of us to feel confident that the right sites are being prioritized, we sort of want to explain how we got to where we are. And these are the headlines. This is essentially what we did to get to where we are. So it was collection of background data, development of the scoring matrix based on the work in Molokai. And then a lot of the data that we got was from eliciting expert opinion, because we could look through management plans, and we did do that if they were available, and other resources, but the site managers could fill in a lot of the gaps or just provide additional new information. So a lot of it is expert opinion. Our partners at the Hawaii Islands Conservation Collective, Jessica Idle and Kristen Harmon, did some assessment of the climate models at 2050 and 2100, and I'll talk a bit more in detail about that in a second. We also collated and assessed hydrological and spatial data, looked at the current and future value for birds, and then gave some of that data a score. What we're going to do next week is agree a weighting on top of that score for the things that we as a community think are really important. And the output, as it was in Molokai, is going to be a prioritized list of sites where you'll get the most kind of bang for your buck, most value for your investment at those sites. Which is not to say sites that don't make the top 10 or 20 or whatever it is aren't important. And again, I'll talk about that in a moment. So the background information, like I said, we use management plans and online resources, but a lot of it was expert opinion. And we looked at boundaries and connectivity. So again, Kristen and Jessica did spatial delineation. So we now have a GIS layer of all the wetlands that are in this plan. And that was created using National Wetland Inventory, DOFO information, and Google Maps. And they also calculated spatial connectivity, so the distance to the nearest managed or unmanaged wetland. And that is not to say if you're managing a wetland that's very far away, that isn't important. It could be an incredibly important stop-off site. It's just an additional piece of information that helps us understand, are we looking at a wetland that's connected to a series of other wetlands, or are we looking at a wetland that might be a migratory stopover, or there's a different kind of dynamic. And then Kristen went into detail with the sea level rise projections by Anderson et al. On what would be happening at 2050 and 2100. And she assessed the amount of the site that would be remaining, basically. So, you know, if more than 75% of the site was affected by marine encroachment, it got a low score, all the way down to if there was very little that was affected, it got a high score. And she also looked at groundwater and marine inundation. And for Kauai, Oahu, and Maui, passive flooding, annual high wave flooding, and coastal erosion. But for Lanai, Molokai, and Hawaii Islands, only passive flooding, because that other information did not exist. We also looked at whether there was space for a wetland to retreat, and that was assessed using the state land use districts in GIS and NOAA land cover classifications. We also looked at physical barriers where we knew sites well enough, and that's something that we might need to add a bit more information to. So if you're a site manager and you see that your space to retreat doesn't seem to reflect reality on the ground, then it might very well be to do with a physical barrier, and we can make changes there. For birds, we used the state water bird counts primarily, so a data set from 2010 to 2020, obviously only looking at native and migratory birds. And for the teeny species, we looked at breeding, an average count per site. And then to include the migrants, we looked at species richness. And we also asked people, maybe you don't have a lot of birds now, perhaps your site is in an early stage of restoration, but what do you think the potential suitability for threatened and endangered birds is after restoration? kind of fill that gap of sites that hadn't quite got there yet. Not all the sites had state water bird count data, and we did use whatever they had if there was a substitute. So all of this went into an enormous matrix. That matrix will not be published, but we are using it for scoring and for the prioritization process, obviously. And some of the data from that matrix will be going into the site narrative. So again, when you get your site narrative, review it and think about whether you're comfortable with that data being out there. If you have any questions, we can answer them. We can talk about anything in the narrative. So definitely take the time to review that. They don't take very long to review, and it's just a good opportunity to make sure that you understand and feel good about everything that's in that narrative. So thanks to David from Makawahi Cave for letting me share his example site narrative. This was a site that scored highly, so it's a nice one to look at. It just gives you an idea of what is going to appear. So there's a narrative description of the site, and then there's the information taken from the matrix and put into these sections of site information and bird information, and then kind of additional wildlife. There's a description of the hydrology, if we have that, identification of some of the primary threats. Then there's the climate table. So whatever came out of the modeling assessment that Kristen Harmon did is going to appear here. So you can see how your site will fare at, actually this has changed. So it's going to say 2050 and 2100. The spatial connectivity distance, and then some of the challenges and actions. So we're hoping that's going to help if people are writing grant applications, and you can refer back to this plan and say, you know, these actions are in line with this plan. That's a helpful thing to be able to do. And then the benefits to people are about kind of ecosystem services and wider benefits to the community, which again, I think is going to help with grant writing. So the scoring. The criteria that are scored are in these broad categories of kind of site information, hydrology, climate, threats and level of control for those threats, restoration status, and birds. So those are the sort of headline categories, and the ones below are the actual criteria that will receive a score. And this is what is going to drive the prioritization process. So this is what we're going to be looking at next week, of thinking about what we want to weight. These are the criteria, and then the kind of subcategories up here. So you can see what we're looking at. It's the first part, and then the second part. And, you know, don't worry about remembering all of this. We're going to go into much more detail next week in the workshops to try and elicit responses from all of you, so that we make sure that the prioritization process is set up right, so that it gives us the right answer. And then just to kind of think about where we're trying to get with this. So, you know, we talked about the goals and objectives at the beginning of the plan. What is going to come out of it at the end is the prioritization of the most important wetlands and actions to maximize the effectiveness of funding and conservation, so that we can look at which sites are going to give us the most benefits and try and channel funding there. Like I said, that doesn't mean that if you are a smaller site or you don't feature at the top, that the plan is not helpful. The idea is to also look at things like low-hanging fruit. So maybe sites that are smaller but have very few roadblocks. So they might be nimble, run by an enthusiastic small nonprofit, able to deliver big benefits even though they have a small acreage, something along those lines. And we can run the prioritization in different ways and have smaller sub-reports, or look for those opportunities that aren't necessarily the really big refuges or sanctuaries. But initially we'll come out with a list which will prioritize the most important wetlands, and then we can look at those other opportunities later. And our plan is that that will lead to successful funding applications, advocacy for funds, kind of a statewide strategic movement to get this work done. the restoration will happen, and that brings all the community resilience benefits with it. So what we're looking for is a strong base to drive wetland work forward statewide. And then end users are going to be all of you, us, funders, decision makers. We really want the plan to be kind of driving our decisions as we go forward to restore wetlands, particularly for birds. And, you know, the early signs are good. I feel like I've been able to, for the first time, when people come and say, you know, I have to respond to a request from Washington, D.C. today by the afternoon. Can you tell me how much would it cost to do wetland restoration over the next 10 years? You know, previously it was a stab in the dark. But for the first time, we're going to be able to really give a decent estimate for what that might look like, and to promote projects at a very short turnaround. Like, we already have the sites, we have the actions. So if there's a quick turnaround, we're going to be able to do it. We'll be able to look at a landscape level for these really big, like the NOAA transformative habitats kind of projects. It'll give us that base so that we're not constantly starting from ground zero, looking at what do we need to, you know, how do we find all these projects? We're going to have them curated. And we want the plan to support climate-based investment. I definitely see how that's going to be a benefit, because there's a site on Kauai that I've been looking at, and it's a private landowner. Conservation maybe isn't at the very top of their agenda, but I'd not exactly written it off, but I wasn't planning to work closely with them. But then when we got the results of the climate assessment, they are in great shape at 2100. And that does make you think differently about sites, about where we start putting the investment in now, so that we have great sites in the future for water birds. And we've also been working all the way along with DLNR and their planning process. So just to kind of address those two plans, we've been working hand in hand on the same basis. The DLNR plan is looking at marshes and ancholine pools. Our plan is looking at all habitats. And then DLNR are mainly looking at state-owned or managed sites, or sites that have a close partnership with the state. We're including all landowners, all and any landowners who wanted to work with us statewide. And then the state obviously has a broad focus on lots of different native species and all taxa. And ours has a particular focus on the recovery of water birds, although the climate resilience and community benefits are also in the forefront of our minds. So, you know, just so that nobody gets confused and thinks that these two planning processes are unconnected, they are very connected, and we work together throughout the process. So just to kind of summarize what we've learned in this process, I think it's very clear as you talk to site managers and as you see projects getting off the ground, that the implementation work is driven by local enthusiasm, and that is how it is going to be going forward. But at a step back, we need the statewide planning to actually get the funding and direct it to the places we need it to go. So we want to keep that place-based focus and momentum. This is kind of the layer above that helps us to access the funding and capacity building that we need. The Molokai work was just a great chance for us to explore this methodology. And now that that prioritization is complete, we're already seeing the dividends. So the Molokai Wetland Partnership got much stronger after the PICASC work finished. The grant applications that we put together were stronger, and there starts to be a snowball of funding because people get a vested interest in kind of supporting the work that they've already invested in. And in Molokai, we've seen the wetland restoration sites that were recommended by PICASC then be incorporated into island-wide resiliency planning through Sustainable Molokai. And the beginnings of community support and understanding on both sides of what the community wants and what the partnership is trying to achieve, that is going to, you know, make or break the success of restoration projects there. So Molokai, I feel like, is a pioneer there, and that's going well. We also saw that climate impacts will definitely drive our decisions about site investment. And the one thing that we do recognize we have not been able to do in this plan is the kind of detailed community engagement that we had in Molokai. So we had nonprofit partners talking one-to-one with people, community meetings, a lot of exchange of information, and we just couldn't do that at the statewide level. You know, even just for Kauai, for example, there are multiple communities that we'd need to engage with, and that just wasn't practical in this process. But Fish and Wildlife and DLNR are interested in helping us make a start on that. So that is definitely on the agenda for future work. So in terms of what is next, if you received your site narrative back, please do review it. That's really important to get your input and make sure that everyone is happy with what comes out in this plan. We want it to be collaborative. We don't want anyone to not feel great about what is being published about their site. And we are happy to make changes and, you know, just talk to land managers and owners to make sure that they feel good about it. I also sent around the introduction to the plan. We welcome comments on that. And the thing we would really love people to participate in are the workshops next week where in Molokai, for example, we collected all the same data, we scored it, but then Judy weighted two things, so climate impacts and community acceptability 3 times higher than any of the other scores. And that was agreed with the partnership and reflected what people wanted to see the prioritization process prioritize, basically. So climate resilient sites and sites that were acceptable to the community for restoration. That might not be what we want to do statewide, and we want to explore that with all of you to make sure that we weight things or don't weight them so that the end prioritization reflects what we as a statewide wetland community want to see. That is it from me. I will stop sharing. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And you can just jump in, unmute yourself, or you can put your hand up, whatever works. The other thing that I forgot to say was that we broadly split those workshops into nonprofits and then the state and federal agencies, but it's not some, you know, secret things happening behind closed doors. It was just a way to manage the process that we had reasonable group sizes. So if you find that you can only attend one of those and you would like to, it just happens to be, you know, an agency one if you're a nonprofit or vice versa, you're welcome to join. And if you can't attend either, we can also just talk you through the process in a one-to-one. Yeah, so Kamiko, the workshop is going to be on Zoom, and I did send round some invitations, but if you didn't get one, just let us know in the chat and put your email in the chat. We can send you an invite. I think actually the link is going to be the same as today. So if all else fails, hit today's link and you'll go through again. Anyone got any questions? I don't see any hands up. And if you know anybody who would like the recording, just let me know. It's not absolutely essential to listen to this description before you come to the workshop, and we welcome anybody to come to those workshops regardless, but I'm not going to get back into the methods, and the understanding the methods is kind of important when it comes to thinking about how you might want to weight them. So we'll get the recording up as quickly as we can, and I can send out, I don't want to sort of email bomb everyone because I know I've been sending a lot of emails to the Wetland Partnership list, but that will be up on our website and should be easy to find. Adonia, I'm just looking at your question. Shoreline accretion and erosion rates on the main islands in the sea level rise modeled impacts. I think that was, they did do some work on that, but not for Molokai, Lanai, or Hawaii Island. But I would need to check with Kristen. Kristen, are you on? I think she was hoping to join us, but she was also on vacation, so perhaps that didn't happen. But I can find out and double check about that. And Nancy, up to you. You're welcome at either one of those sessions. It maybe might be better if it's easier for you to attend the state and federal one, but also fine if you want to do the other one. And thanks for doing the site narrative. Okay, well, if there's any other questions or anything occurs to you, you can email me or give me a call. And I really look forward to seeing everyone on the 25th and the 27th next week. See you all soon.